Welcome to our special edition of European Report. My name is Tomas Sandell, founding director of European Coalition for Israel. And today I'm joined by my colleague, our director for UN Affairs, and also the co-founder of the Forum for Cultural Diplomacy, Gregory Lafitte. Good to have you on the program.
Good to be here. Thank you, Thomas.
Let us say that this is all in introduction to our global Celebrate Israel marathon. This is to give some context, some background to what happened in Durban 20 years ago. Because the reason why we've chosen the 5th of September for this Celebrate Israel marathon is, of course, that obviously it's one day ahead of Rosh HaShanah, but it also marks the Sunday closest to the 8th of September, which was the closing date for the UN World Conference against racism. Usually, as students of political science, we'll look at nation states as the prime movers of international politics. But as we know, increasingly, NGOs, very well funded Western NGOs, have budgets and ways of influencing media. We can just mention Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, who really are able to set the agenda. And there was, on the one hand, an official conference for the nation states, and then there was the NGO conference, which turned out to be much more vicious even than the official conference. Mentioning the NGO conference, of course, we have to also take into account the Christian world, which did not play a very constructive role, and we have pointed out this many times. How disappointing it is that the large Christian organizations would side with radical Islamists on the one hand, and then also very radical left-wing groups. Anti-Semitism today, of course, comes in many shapes and forms, but it came in an unexpected form. And maybe you could elaborate on why in Durban, why in South Africa? Was this just a coincidence?
Well, I think, unfortunately, it could have happened anywhere, but there are reasons why I believe it happened. It was really unfortunate for South Africa and for Durban that it was there, that it happened, because now the name of the town of Durban is attached to this. But you know, I very much like to study the roots of all of this, the roots of anti-Semitism, and to try to understand where it comes from. I like to try to find what I would call the blueprint of anti-Semitism. How does it appear? And all the elements were there in Durban for it to appear. What is quite interesting is that, as I already mentioned, it didn't just appear in 2001 in 1975. It was already there in New York at the United Nations. But even if we try to look back in history, I would say it goes back. Of course, it goes back, we would say, to the time of Esther. That's where, in the book of Esther, that's where we see the best definition of anti-Semitism. But really, the kind of phenomenon that we saw in Durban, we saw it already in the first century. And I think it's important to point out that one of the person who is recognized as one of the major historians of his time, who was Tacitus, he wrote something about the Jews, that point out what the problem is, and how it's really almost impossible to escape this, to really avoid this. And I'll just read a translation in English. And he wrote concerning the Jewish people: to establish his influence over this people for all time, Moses introduced new religious practices, quite opposed to those of all other religions. The Jews regard as profane all that we hold sacred. on the other hand, they permit all that we abhor. In Latin, when I just read we, it's written apudnos, and it's a way of describing all of humanity. And so it's saying that the Jews with their beliefs, with their practices, they distinguish themselves from all of humanity. And Jean-Claude Milner, who is a philosopher, a linguist, he summarized this as saying that by their rites and their customs, the Jews make it impossible to consider all of humanity in a consistent way. They render impossible the use of the for all quantifier when speaking of all human beings. When they live in the heart of the oikumene, they fragment humanity. So as long as they are here, and Tacitus is not calling for their destruction, but as long as they are here, all of mankind is a badly formed expression. So it is impossible to paint a complete and consistent picture of human behavior. Profane and sacred, those words, they become ambiguous, and their opposition becomes blurred, unless, in order to save the for all quantifier, we make the Jews an exception. So every universal project, as soon as it does not want to consider its cracks, its constitutive exceptions, every universal project is threatened by the totalitarian temptation, which, to save it all, will always put the Jews in a position of exception. So to summarize, Jew hatred always builds itself as a dream of all, of universality, if I may, of Ubuntu, which requires of the Jew to be in this position of exception. And that is the problem. So every time we try to do something universal, and that was really the quest, what was hoped for in Durban, to find a universal way of combating racism, then there is an exception with the Jewish people that is considered, that is seen. And I think that there is a clear reason for that, which is very simple, is the difference of nature between racism and anti-Semitism. Racism is really a sentiment that we have towards the other of superiority, a sentiment of superiority, of thinking that we are better, and that the other who is different is less. And anti-Semitism is almost the antithesis of that. And in that there is it's more around the notion of jealousy, of saying that the Jew has something that I have not, he is what I am not, and so the difference of nature between racism and anti-Semitism is so strong. It's almost the antithesis of one of the other. And with what we see through Tacitus and the study of Jean-Claude Milner, we see that in a way it could not have happened any other way at Durban. That's the difficulty, and that's still the difficulty we see today. And so, in conclusion of that, I would say that it's important to understand this, to fight racism and anti-Semitism separately, but also it points out that our fight against anti-Semitism should really be in recognizing everything that the Jewish culture has given to us, and celebrating it, and seeing how much it's part of who we are, the ecumene, all of us. We are all have been influenced by the Jewish culture, have had an impact on the Jewish culture.
Let me point or add two things, perhaps more from a political scientist perspective. One, of course, is the irrationality of anti-Semitism. I would perhaps even more emphasis how irrational it is, because, as you rightly said, Jews are hated today often by people who are jealous in a way. They say,
Yes.
well, the Jews control everything, they own everything, this and that. But there is, of course, also the other side. You know, if we look historically, the Jews were hated because, you know, they looked different. They were too poor. You know,
Yes.
they were either too rich or too poor. So it's very complicated.
Yes.
The other thing that I think it's important to point out, looking at the Durban, of course, is that this really presented a new mutation, as the late Chief Rabbi Lord Sachs would say, of anti-Semitism, where the Jews were not hated so much any longer for their wrong religion or their wrong race, but now increasingly because of their state, the Jewish state, irrespectively of if they support Israel or not. And this was, of course, when we speak about new anti-Semitism, we are talking about anti-Zionism, the new attempts to delegitimize a Jewish state, to demonize the Jewish state. But also, as we saw in Durban, it never stops there, and anti-Semites never make a distinction.
Yes.
So regardless of who were there, you know, Jewish human rights activists, they were just as much targeted. So this, in a way, really revealed the cards of the anti-Semite, that, you know, they say, to quote Martin Luther King, they say Israel, they mean the Jews. But a lot could be said about that. But when we look at Durban today, 20 years later, we think of the BDS movement. We think about apartheid weeks at universities, and something which is very popular in church circles is, you know, they send observers to the Palestinian territories only to try to find faults among the IDF. So this is, of course, the result, but still, you mentioned it yourself, it wasn't just Durban, there was Durban too, and we were there together.
Yes.
In Geneva in 2008. We were also together in New York in 2011.
Yes.
And now we're here 10 years later. But tell us, Gregory, what are the plans for 2021?
Yes, I think you said 2008. I just want to say that it was 2009 in Geneva. Yes, but so the plans. So we are 20 years after Durban, and a meeting is planned. A high-level meeting is planned on the 22nd of September. So it's the second day of the general debate. If I'm not mistaken, it will be on Wednesday. And so a number of heads of state or government or foreign ministers are expected there. And it's important to point out that, for example, if I'm not mistaken, in 2009, there was the review conference in 2009. So what people have called Durban 2. There was only one head of state there, who was Ahmadinejad. And so to give, we know what happened in Durban 1, in Durban 2, in Durban 3. It's you remember this sentence attributed to Einstein: "We're not crazy. We know what will happen." So a number of nations have already announced that they will boycott the conference. In 2009, in Geneva, there were 10 who had boycotted the conference, 14 in 2011, and now there are already 12. 7 European nations, 7 EU nations, plus 4 plus Israel. And so we are hoping and doing everything we can to have more nations boycott this meeting, and because we know that it unfortunately will lead to more anti-Semitism.
Maybe we should, for the record, even mention and honor the nations.
I agree. I was thinking of doing it, but yes, I have made sure that I wasn't going to forget any of them. So the 7 EU nations who have announced that they want to be at the conference is Austria, Bulgaria, the Czech Republic, France, Germany, Hungary, and the Netherlands. And outside of the EU will be Australia, Canada, the United States, the United Kingdom, and Israel. Yeah. And we are expecting many more but also we could perhaps even hope that the UN would realize that this is not going to end well. So to do something, to just perhaps skip the review conference, or even the Secretary General could boycott the conference.
Yeah. I can without mentioning the name, I know of an additional state which is going to pull out, and they still don't want to announce it. So we at least have 13, yes, but I think there will be more. And Gregory, as you mentioned, we are doing everything we can to present this cause to the governments which we are close to. But kudos really to the ones who have taken this courageous step. Let us also say that our Rosh HaShanah, Celebrate Israel Marathon, is not only a way of marking the 20th anniversary of the Durban Conference, but on a much more positive note, because, you know, as the Chinese would say, don't only curse the darkness, you know, light a candle. And this is what we did 20 years ago, where we saw the need for people who want to courageously stand up for the Jewish people, but to do it in a relevant way in the international arenas around the world, be it the European Union or the United Nations. So this is a happy moment for us to look back, and we call it a celebration because we have all these wonderful people from around the world who have sent in their videos, and I've seen you know, music and dance, and I know there will be poems and such a rich variety of cultural expressions. But little gift to the state of Israel ahead of Rosh Hashanah. Israel is not alone. There's so many friends around the world. And what we have done, because we said it would be good to have some conformity, so we drafted a declaration. It will be read in many languages.
So we call it the Declaration on the Eve of Rosh Hashanah, 5782. On this eve of Rosh Hashanah, we honor the chosen people, who, as the Shabbat prayer says, are a people set apart from all peoples and called to be a light unto the nations. As much as we are committed to fighting all forms of racism, we are resolute in fighting the distinct hatred of anti-Semitism, the world's oldest hatred in all its expressions. We recognize the right of the Jewish people to self-determination in their ancestral homeland, a right inscribed in international law since 1920. We celebrate that this right was realized and honored in the rebirth of the State of Israel in 1948 and her admission to the family of nations. We pledge our commitment to ensuring that this right is fully upheld by the international community so that its continued fulfillment can be enjoyed by the Jewish people. Whether in philosophy, literature, art and music, science, technology, medicine, or business, Jews have been instrumental in writing and shaping our history and illuminating our culture. We cherish their presence among us. We wish Israel and the Jewish community around the world a good and sweet New Year 5782. Shana Tova Umetuka.
So this is the new Durban Declaration. We haven't decided on what city, if it's a Helsinki declaration or something else, but it's a new declaration. Would you like to comment why?
Yes, I think in a way it summarizes very well with our discussion until now. The way it starts by saying that we honor the chosen people. People set apart from all peoples, that's as it is written in the Shabbat prayer. and a prayer said every Shabbat. I think it's really important. This point is key. Many times it has been misunderstood. The question of the chosen people. But what it really means actually in Hebrew is that it is a people who is able to make the distinction, the distinctions, who is able to distinguish, to see, to distinguish one thing from another. And what our discussion concerning what happened in Durban, I think it's important to say the Jewish people is set apart from all peoples, not in a superior way, but really to be a light to the nations. And then the second part is clearly about denouncing this problem of seeing Zionism as racism. Why couldn't the Jewish people have their own right to self-determination, which is what Zionism is? And so we want to honor that, to recognize this, and to celebrate it. Mm-hmm. And the third paragraph, I think I can say that this is something we have been saying in many meetings, either at the European Parliament or at the United Nations, all the contributions of the Jewish culture to humanity. And we were so happy to see that the president of Germany, President Steinmeier, really used this same kind of words to start the celebrations of a great number of years of the presence of the Jewish people in Germany. And so this is for us like the antidote to anti-Semitism, is recognizing everything they give to us. Mm-hmm. And then, as this is Rosh HaShanah, we want to wish Israel and the Jewish people a happy new year. And so Shana Tova Umetuka is in Hebrew to say happy new, a good and a sweet new year.
Absolutely. And maybe two additional points just to clarify. So European Coalition for Israel, maybe one of our most significant achievements over the years is really to establish the Sanremo, the knowledge about the Sanremo resolution in the international community, because it's so important, not only as a legal document, but because it really illustrates how the Jewish people are the indigenous people of the land. They're not the colonizers, or it's not a racist endeavor as they would say in Durban. It's absolutely the opposite. And as we've said so many times, when the Jewish people reconstituted their state, it was an inspiration for the decolonization process. So Africa, in this respect, can look at what happened in Israel as an inspiration. And this is what happened for so many years before things changed. But thank God, things are changing back in a good way. And we see Israel today having more friends than ever before. We see the Abraham Accords with the new rapprochement with their Arab neighbors. So we also have to take this into account. We're not on the losing side of history in any way, but on the contrary, we are gaining ground. Let me also mention that talking about indigenous, as you will see in this global Celebrate Israel Marathon, there is also a launch of an indigenous coalition for Israel, which is very interesting, where you have the indigenous groups in many parts of the world honoring Israel in a way as the firstborn. And I think this is very special as well. But with a few minutes left, let's look a little bit at the future. Gregory, what can we do to present a different paradigm that what we learned in Durban, one of blessings and appreciations of the Jewish culture?
Well, I think one thing we ought to do is correct this narrative, and and really understand and recognize how and why anti-Semitism showed its ugly head again in all of this. And one of the things that you mentioned is that unfortunately the church representatives who were in Durban didn't react in a good way. They didn't even see that there was anti-Semitism at play, and so we missed an opportunity again. 50 years after the Shoah, we still had, in Durban, we still had not understood that we can't tolerate any anti-Semitism in any way. And so this is something we have been working on, to try to address the problem of anti-Semitism in the church. And as many have started to stand against anti-Semitism, to declare that they are standing against anti-Semitism, that addressing the issue, when we saw that, we thought, well, if a football club can say no to anti-Semitism, so can a church. And this is this process that we are still working on, that started last year, and that we're trying to find more good, willing people around the world, in the Christian world, to announce that they will stand against anti-Semitism. And this project we have called Churches Against Anti-Semitism, or with the hashtag I am my brother's keeper. This is, I believe, key. As today we've missed many opportunities in the past, and of course during the Shoah, for the Christian world to stand up against this the world's all this hatred. It's time for the world to really stand against it.
No, that's so important, and as we've seen, it's nothing that we can take for granted. With the IRA working definition of anti-Semitism, we do have churches that find it difficult to sign that pledge. So there's a lot of work to be done. Also, something I think that people appreciate us, the work we do, because we don't want primarily to point fingers to others outside of our faith communities. We could easily do so, but we want to learn, and we think there's a lot to be done in our faith community when it comes to relating to the Jewish people in a respectful way. But also, of course, the work we do at the United Nations. Yes. I think it's important to say, we have a new audience today, that we work obviously on a grassroots level, but also on a diplomatic level at the United Nations and at the European Union. And I think the approach, what we call a positive narrative, so fighting anti-Semitism by not simply tolerating the Jewish people, but doing as we've done today and we'll do in the marathon, to say that more than tolerating, we acknowledge all the rich contributions, and we want to celebrate Israel. So today is a day of celebrations, and I think this is something where many nations have said that this is an very helpful approach, that we don't always, to use the same metaphor, we don't always curse the darkness. We light our small candles of hope. But anything before the closing reading, anything you would like to add, Gregory?
We won't just curse the darkness, and so we won't just say no to what happened in Durban and to this Durban 4 meeting. We applaud, we say bravo to those who have already announced, and to those who will announce, that to the nations who have announced that they will boycott this meeting. but there's more we can do, and there's more things, positive things we can do. We don't only need to say no to anti-Semitism and no to this meeting, but we can say yes to something positive, and this is what we are doing at the United Nations with this a group of friends of the Jewish culture, and many of the nations who have courageously announced that they won't participate in the Durban meeting, the Durban 4 meeting, are already members of this group, and others have indicated their interest, and so we invite many more to not only say no to anti-Semitism, but to say yes to the Jewish people in their midst, to the living culture and the history, but also the everything that the Jewish people is bringing to this world today.
Absolutely. Gregory, you are the co-founder of the Forum for Cultural Diplomacy, and we could, in that capacity, we could never conclude a webinar without reading a text. And I know that you have selected a text which will also be read in Geneva outside the UN headquarters. So please, would you read the text, and maybe you want to explain what it is?
It's a text from Albert Cohen. It's a translation of an excerpt of the masterpiece, really, of Albert Cohen, which is called La Geste des Juifs. La Geste des Juifs in French means the tale of the Jews. But I'll read it now in English. O my people, my suffering people, I am your son who loves and venerates you, your son who will never tire of praising his people Israel, a loyal people, a courageous people, a stiff-necked people who in a holy citadel braved Rome under the Caesars and for 7 years made the most powerful of empires tremble. O my 960 heroes besieged in Masada, who all took their own lives on the first day of Passover in the year 73. Rather than submit to the Roman conqueror and bow down to his contemptible gods. O my starving wanderers, held captive in so many foreign fields, howling their dogged hope down the centuries and eternally refusing to disperse and be absorbed by the nations where they lived in exile. O my proud people, bent on survival and jealousy guarding its soul, a people who stood firm and resisted not for a year, not for 5 years, not for 10 years, but a people who stood firm for 2,000 years. What other people stood firm for so long? Yes, 2,000 years of resistance, a beacon to light, the way of all other peoples. O my forefathers, down the length of the centuries, who preferred massacre to betrayal and the stake to apostasy, licked by flames and proclaiming unto their last breath the oneness of God and the greatness of their faith. O my medieval kinsmen, who chose death over conversion in Verdun-sur-Garonne, in Carentan, in Bray, in Burgos, in Barcelona, in Toledo, in Trent, in Nuremberg, in Worms, in Frankfurt, in Spires, in Oppenheim, in Mainz, through the length and breadth of Germany from the Alps to the North Sea. O wonder of wonders, the miserable and despised creature that was a Jew knew that soon the Almighty would set his feet on the road back to Jerusalem. O my living people, and while he waited, his powerful enemies fell and perished down the length of centuries. Dead are the peoples who devoured us. Whole dead, the Assyrians, so proud of their battle scars, so proud in their broad armor. Dead, the pharaohs and the chariots of war. Dead, the august great buttocked war of Babylon, pestle of the protesting earth. Dead, Rome and its legions, in grave battle, order aligned, but Israel lives on. 2 daughters of Jerusalem, one Jewish and one Christian. Both are queens of mankind and eternal enemies of the laws of nature. And whether they know it or not, whether they wish it or not, man's noblest qualities are rooted in the Jewish soul. And the rock on which they stand is the Bible. O my lovely Jews, to whom I speak in silence, know your people, Israel. Venerate your people, Israel, for seeking schism and separation, for having taken up arms against nature and nature's laws. O my Christian brothers, you will see how my people will regain their youth when they return in freedom to Jerusalem. And they will exemplify justice and courage. They will be a witness for other nations who will look and stand amazed, and beneath the sun in that sky there will be no more bores. My lovely pathetic bores, the luckless offspring of centuries of pain. And you will see how the sons of my people, restored to the land of Israel, will be serene and proud and handsome and noble in bearing and brave in war if need be. And when at last you see our true face, hallelujah, you will love my people. You will love Israel.
From the two of us here in Helsinki, and Gregory, you are in the south of France, we say Shana Tova.
Shana Tova.